chosen ones, the hour you were warned of has arrived, and the earth itself groans to acknowledge it. A hidden tremor surged across the land, rattling the unseen foundations of power. It was not an earthquake born of fault lines, but a pulse of spirit, an invisible vibration that startled even the watchmen of nations. The walls of the White House quivered, though no storm or weapon struck. Those in the highest seats of authority felt the weight of something they could not define, and their silence betrayed their fear. It was not a mere sound, nor just a force. It was a signal, a resonance echoing from the core of your being, reverberating through unseen realms. The president, restless and unable to calm his steps, paced beneath vaulted ceilings, trying to steady his breath while aides dared not speak. They knew something had shifted, yet none could name it. The vibration had gone forth from you, chosen ones, as though the very chambers of your soul released a frequency long concealed. Hidden texts once whispered of a generation whose presence alone would send tremors through the councils of kings. Now, that whisper has become thunder. Even those sworn to secrecy have begun to sense it, scribbling notes they dare not archive, fearing that history will trace the disturbance back to its source. You, the power you carry, is not new. It is ancient, older than empires and governments. It was buried in bloodlines, carried like fire sealed within vessels of clay, waiting for the moment of awakening. That moment has come, and though officials will attempt to disguise it as structural fatigue, faulty equipment, or a mere accident of physics, the truth gnaws at them. They are witnessing prophecy in motion. For what shakes the world does not come from machines, but from the stirring of the unseen. And while corridors of authority tremble, the vibration continues to climb, reaching toward something even greater. The night was calm, but the stillness was shattered by something no instrument could measure. Beneath the White House, in the labyrinth of corridors and hidden chambers, a resonance began to stir. It was not thunder, not machinery, not even the rumble of earth. It was a pulse, subtle yet undeniable, moving like a wave of invisible power through the marble floors and iron beams. Men in suits stiffened as they felt it travel through their shoes, a low hum that settled into their bones. No alarm sounded, yet the Secret Service exchanged wary glances. Lights flickered once, but quickly returned, as though the building itself wanted to conceal its shudder. Those within the Situation Room spoke in hushed tones, sensing something extraordinary, but refusing to be the first to name it. There was no protocol for a vibration that seemed alive, no manual for explaining why the air itself carried the weight of unseen energy. Some whispered it might be a structural fault. Others thought of underground testing, though no evidence could be found. Yet there was an awareness that none dared put into words. The tremor was not a natural phenomenon. It felt intentional, as though it sought to announce itself directly to the heart of power. The walls of authority had become a stage for an invisible message, and those who felt it knew instinctively it had nothing to do with geology. The president had been briefed on countless crises, from wars to storms to cyber threats, but never on the vibration of a human soul strong enough to move stone and steel. He wandered the hallways that night, his shoes echoing against the floor, his breathing shallow. Every step he took was accompanied by that faint hum, as though the building itself followed him with an unspoken warning. If one stood still enough, it was almost like hearing a distant song. Not words, not melody, but a frequency that seemed to touch both body and spirit. Those who were most sensitive felt it in their chests, a resonance that lingered long after the floors grew quiet again. It was a soundless knock at the door of history, waiting to be opened. He did not sleep that night. The pacing had slowed, but his mind remained restless, circling questions he could not silence. Every corridor of the White House seemed to hold an echo of the tremor, as if the vibration had imprinted itself into the very architecture. He pressed his palm against the wall once, searching for the familiar solidity of stone, yet what met him was something different. An afterglow, a faint quiver, like the residue of a storm that had already passed. His aides found him staring into space more than once, lips pressed tight, unwilling to speak what he truly felt. The unease was not simply fear of the unknown, it was recognition. Somewhere deep in his spirit, the president knew this vibration was not mechanical or political. It carried a weight older than his office, older than the Republic itself. He thought of ancient writings he had once dismissed, texts that spoke of voices shaking not only the earth, but the heavens also. That phrase returned to him now, and though he could not name its origin, it carried the scent of prophecy. In the Situation Room, generals demanded answers. Intelligence officers spoke in circles, presenting data that explained nothing. Seismographs showed calm Earth. Satellites detected no blasts, and radar swept clean skies. Yet the silence in the president's chest told him otherwise. It was not silence born of peace, but silence that pressed with the heaviness of awaiting truth. He avoided their eyes, fearing that if he acknowledged what lingered inside him, the burden would become too real. In that quiet, he remembered how Yeshua once said, "If these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out." The words came unbidden, unsettling him. What if this vibration was the stones themselves, crying, heralding something no government could control? What if it was not a threat from enemies abroad, but a stirring from within, an awakening of something meant to confront power with light no walls could contain? He stood before the great window of the Oval Office, staring into the darkness beyond the lawn. Somewhere out there, he knew, was the source of the tremor. Not a weapon, not a fault line, but a presence. A presence that had chosen to reveal itself now. The vibration did not fade as the days passed. It remained, subtle but persistent, as though it had settled into the very air itself. At first, only those within the White House spoke of it in hushed tones, fearing ridicule if they voiced their unease too openly. But soon, staffers and guards alike began to confess that they too felt a pressure in the atmosphere, an invisible weight that followed them from room to room. It was not loud, not even disruptive, yet it demanded acknowledgement. The soundless pulse became a companion, refusing to be ignored. Scientists were quietly summoned, their instruments arranged in secret basements, where wires ran like veins across cold floors. They measured electromagnetic fields, vibration patterns, even fluctuations in temperature. Yet the frequency eluded every machine. What baffled them most was not what their instruments revealed, but what their own bodies told them. Each scientist, no matter how skeptical, admitted feeling the hum beneath their skin, as though their bones were tuning forks resonating with an unseen song. The president received daily reports that said nothing useful, only confirming what he already knew in his spirit, that the phenomenon could not be quantified or contained. He had hoped to bury it under paperwork and bureaucracy, to label it and file it away in secrecy. But this was not like any other threat. You cannot lock away a vibration. You cannot silence what flows through air, through stone, through flesh. Those who were most spiritually attuned began to whisper theories. Some called it the rising of the earth itself. Others believed it to be the stirring of an ancient covenant, a call that could only be answered by the ones destined to carry it. The president avoided those whispers, yet they gnawed at him, because deep inside he knew the hum was not random. It was directed, deliberate, purposeful. At night, when the building grew quiet, the frequency seemed louder. It seeped into his dreams, shaking loose fragments of memory and dread. He would wake with the sensation that the vibration had spoken to him, though he could never remember the words. Far from the marble halls of government, an old voice stirred. The prophets were never invited into the rooms of power, yet their words often arrived there first, carried like wind before a storm. One such man, long forgotten by the media and dismissed by scholars, began to speak again. He had warned of a vibration that would one day sweep across the nations, beginning in silence but swelling until it drowned out every voice of opposition. Now his whispers returned, unsettling those who remembered his earlier warnings. He spoke of a frequency that was not born of man but awakened through man, a living wave that could bend not only stone but also spirit. To some, his words sounded like poetry. To others, they carried the weight of undeniable truth. He claimed the tremor felt in Washington was only the first ripple, a precursor to a surge that would come like tides breaking against ancient walls. The White House was not the target, he said. It was merely the first witness. Hidden circles took his words seriously. Intelligence officers, though forbidden to mention prophets in official reports, kept private notes. They knew history was littered with moments when government scoffed until the impossible arrived. The whisper spread through networks, and in the silence of late-night rooms, officials replayed his words again and again. The president, though he would not admit it openly, had already heard of this man. His aides had carefully concealed the reports, but fragments still found their way to him. In the quiet of his office, he read lines that unsettled him. "The wave shall rise in the marrow of the chosen, and none shall still its sound until the heavens themselves answer." As he read, the vibration stirred once more beneath his feet. The coincidence was too exact to ignore. He closed the file, but the words burned into his mind, echoing with the hum that had haunted his nights. If the prophet was right, then the tremor was not a random occurrence. It was the first sign of something destined to grow, something no human command could restrain. It was not only the halls of the White House that quivered. Far beyond its walls, in places where sunlight rarely touched, others began to feel the same unsettling current. In underground rooms where decisions were made in secrecy, men in black suits paused mid-sentence, their voices caught by an invisible weight pressing through the air. Screens flickered, lights dimmed, and for a fleeting moment, silence claimed dominion. They tried to dismiss it as a technical fault, but deep down, each of them knew it was the same force that unsettled the president's steps. The pulse did not need permission to enter. It flowed like water into every chamber, finding its way into the most fortified places. Shadow councils, accustomed to controlling narratives, felt powerless against what their eyes could not see, but their bodies could not deny. They convened hastily, not to reveal truth, but to bury it before the public ever heard. Still, how could they bury what seeped through stone and steel? Agents reported odd sensations during their assignments. Some described pressure in their chests, Others, a faint ringing in their ears that followed them home. A few, shaken beyond measure, admitted that the pulse carried with it visions, flashes of fire, waves of light, even voices they could not explain. These confessions were quickly classified, locked away in archives already overflowing with unexplained phenomena. Yet the more they tried to contain it, the stronger the pulse seemed to grow. Whispers spread in secret corridors. What if the vibration was not merely energy, but intent? What if it was seeking out certain ones, singling them out in the crowd, stirring them awake? Such ideas terrified those whose power depended on control, for they could manipulate documents, silence journalists, even topple governments, but they could not command the unseen, and so fear became their companion. It lingered behind every closed meeting, every rushed directive, every denial spoken through clenched teeth. They feared the people who carried the vibration even more than the pulse itself, for if such souls awakened fully, their resonance would shatter every wall of secrecy. The shadows trembled, not because they doubted its source, but because they knew this was only the beginning of what it had come to unleash. The storm rolled in without warning. Over the capital, clouds gathered with an urgency that unsettled even seasoned meteorologists. Lightning slashed the sky, not in scattered bursts, but in deliberate patterns that seemed to trace symbols across the heavens. Those who watched from windows swore they saw letters forming, ancient and luminous, flashing for a moment before vanishing into the dark. It was not only thunder that shook the night, but a resonance that merged with the pulse already stirring beneath the earth. The president stood at his window again, the same unease returning as the sky ignited. Each strike seemed closer than the last, each rumble carrying a weight deeper than sound. He pressed his hand against the glass, feeling a vibration that mirrored the hum haunting him for weeks. Then, in a single flash brighter than the rest, he thought he heard it. Not a sound through ears, but a word inscribed upon his spirit. It was a name, holy and unyielding, resounding within him like fire. Others felt it too. Across the city, strangers paused mid-step, eyes lifted, hearts pierced by a presence they could not explain. Some wept, others trembled, but none could deny what they had heard within. It was as though the storm itself had chosen to declare what men in power refused to speak. The name carried authority, a reminder of a presence that could not be silenced. And those who knew the scriptures remembered how Yeshua once declared, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." Now, the heavens themselves seemed to repeat that truth, marking the skies with divine handwriting. In hidden chambers, officials dismissed the phenomenon as weather, but their hearts betrayed them. Even in their denial, they could not shake the soundless word reverberating through their thoughts. They knew that if the vibration had grown strong enough to speak in lightning, then its next expression would be beyond anything they could conceal. The storm passed as quickly as it had come, leaving behind a sky eerily clear. But the silence that followed was not peace. It was anticipation. For everyone who had heard the name in their spirit carried it now like fire sealed within their chest, waiting for the next strike. They met behind locked doors, in chambers designed to muffle sound and guard secrets. The air was thick with unease as the council gathered, their faces pale beneath the dim glow of recessed lights. Reports lay scattered across the polished table, each filled with the same unsettling theme: testimonies of the pulse, the hum, the unrelenting vibration that refused to vanish. Some spoke of tremors under the White House, others of storms inscribing symbols in the sky, but all pointed toward a truth no one wished to admit. The council prided itself on control. They had steered wars, managed crises, and crafted narratives to guide the masses. Yet here they sat, confronted by something that mocked their power. No strategy could bind it. No order could silence it. No law could erase it. The vibration was everywhere and nowhere, appearing without pattern, striking without warning, unsettling the foundations of their authority. Some tried to rationalize, suggesting hidden technologies, foreign experiments, or natural anomalies. But their explanations rang hollow, and the silence that followed their words betrayed disbelief. The truth they would not speak aloud pressed heavily upon them. This was not the work of men. The president's unease weighed on them most. If he faltered, the chain of command would fracture, and their grip would weaken. They had already seen his sleepless eyes, his restless pacing, his refusal to name what haunted him. They feared he would one day break his silence and reveal to the public what could never be explained away. Among them sat those who had felt the resonance more strongly than others. In private moments, they admitted it was not merely vibration, but presence, alive, intelligent, watchful. The idea terrified them. For if the pulse was aware, then it had chosen its moment, and perhaps its witnesses. The council, accustomed to controlling the flow of history, now found themselves reduced to trembling observers. Long before steel towers and satellites, there were scrolls, etched with patterns that seemed meaningless to the untrained eye. Hidden among ruins and guarded in secret vaults, these writings spoke of sound not as noise, but as power. They described vibration as the language of creation, a code woven into the fabric of existence itself. Every stone, every tree, every living soul carried within it a frequency, a resonance that connected it to the divine rhythm of the cosmos. Scholars who studied these fragments often dismissed them as allegory, but those who looked deeper began to see a pattern. The ancient texts spoke of a time when chosen vessels would awaken, their very presence stirring vibrations strong enough to rattle empires. It was not war or weapon that would shift history, but sound, a pulse rising from within humanity itself. Within one sealed manuscript, a passage stood out, describing a voice that could shake both heaven and earth. The words echoed eerily with the tremors now felt in Washington. Once more, it read, the heavens will sound, and the stones themselves will cry. It was a verse strangely similar to what Yeshua had spoken long ago, when he declared that if the people kept silent, creation itself would erupt in praise. Now, centuries later, the pulse rising through walls and bodies felt like the fulfillment of those very declarations. Rumors spread that hidden archives in Rome and beyond had long known of this prophecy, but had kept it buried, fearing what would happen if the world understood its meaning. The code of vibration was not just ancient knowledge. It was a warning, and perhaps even a map, pointing to those whose awakening could not be stopped. The president never saw these scrolls, yet his heart seemed to sense their truth. Every night he felt the hum increase, as though some invisible hand was tuning the world toward a greater crescendo. Scientists scrambled, prophets whispered, and councils trembled, but none could deny the acceleration. The vibration was not fading. It was organizing, aligning, preparing. They had been there long before the tremor reached the White House. long before councils gathered and storms carved symbols across the heavens. They were unseen, yet always present. Watchers who moved in silence, observing the rising pulse as though it were the signal they had been waiting for. Some said they were human, bound to secrecy by bloodlines stretching back to forgotten ages. Others whispered they were not human at all, but remnants of an older order, sent to witness the unfolding of a prophecy hidden in plain sight. These watchers felt the vibration differently than others. For the common man, it was a hum, unsettling but unexplainable. For the watchers, it was a language, every wave a syllable, every tremor a phrase. They leaned into it like scholars reading an ancient script, their eyes widening as each new resonance added meaning to the message. The hidden frequency was not chaos, it was communication. Something was speaking through the vibration, and only those attuned to its rhythm could hear. Reports of their presence filtered through shadow channels. A guard swore he saw figures standing outside the White House fence one night, unmoving, their faces lost in the dark. When approached, they vanished into the mist, leaving behind no trace but the lingering echo of the hum. Others claimed to have met them in dreams, their voices calm, their eyes reflecting the same light as the storm that once carved words into the sky. The president was not told of them directly, but he felt their gaze all the same. At times, while pacing the hallways, he would pause suddenly, certain that someone was watching. No camera revealed them, no sensor detected them, yet the weight of their presence pressed against him like a hand upon his shoulder. The watchers were not there to comfort nor to terrify. They were witnesses, guardians of a truth too vast for governments to contain. Their silence was not ignorance, but anticipation. They knew the pulse was building toward something greater, and their duty was to watch until the moment arrived. The night the vibration reached its peak, the world seemed to hold its breath. It no longer trembled as a distant hum, nor whispered like faint thunder in the walls. It roared without sound, an invisible quake surging through every living thing. The White House shook again, but this time it was not alone. Across oceans, mountains, and cities, people felt the same resonance rising from within their very bones. Clocks faltered, lights flickered, and hearts pounded in rhythm with the unseen force. This was not chaos, but convergence. The scattered pulses, once unpredictable, now aligned into a single, unified wave. It struck with such intensity that those sensitive to it fell to their knees, not from fear, but from recognition. They knew, instinctively, that this was the moment long hidden in scrolls, the hour prophets had whispered of in caves and deserts. The flame within humanity, buried for generations, had erupted into quaking light. The president could no longer pace, no longer deny. He stood frozen at the center of the storm, his heart hammering in time with the frequency. It was as though the walls themselves demanded acknowledgement, the air vibrating with a name unspoken yet undeniable. In that instant, he realized the resonance was not meant to destroy, but to awaken. What had begun as an unsettling hum had revealed itself as the call of destiny, a flame igniting across the souls of the chosen. Reports poured in of visions. Some saw fire spiraling into the heavens. Others saw rivers of light weaving through cities. A few swore they saw faces in the brilliance, watchers and angels alike, bearing witness to the unveiling of a mystery too great for words. For a fleeting moment, humanity stood on the threshold of something beyond power, beyond politics, beyond fear. Yet the quake did not bring conclusion. It lingered, unfinished, as if withholding its final word. The resonance pulsed one last time, deeper and stronger than ever before, then fell silent. The silence was not emptiness, but anticipation, as though the world itself was pausing before the final unveiling.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.